Hi everyone, thanks for coming back for part 2. It's actually part 3. So what happened is I had noticed that the Strong's number for Adam in the Greek is Strong's number G76, and of course Adam was made of the earth, and the Strong's number for earth in the Hebrew is H776. You can see that means land or earth. And so I thought that was interesting because the word head in the Greek, it starts out with Strong's number 2776. This is the word head. And then the next Strong's number is 2777, which means little head or the roll of a book or the toe cap of a shoe. And so it starts out with Strong's number 776 or 2776, and this is the word that's used for the head of the corner that you see in Luke 20:17 and 1 Peter 2:7. Okay, I'll go ahead and show you that. It's also in Psalm 118 verse 22, and like I've said before, this is all about DNA ultimately, but as you can see, the word for head is Strong's number 2776, and it's actually used 76 times in the New Testament. And as I've mentioned before, the height of the pyramid is estimated at 5,776 inches with the capstone. And so this would match up with the head of the corner, which is Strong's number 2776. So I thought it was interesting that the word Adam is G76, and Adam comes from the earth, and the Strong's number for earth in the Hebrew is H776. Of course, Jesus is the head of the corner, but he's also the foundation of the temple. A lot of people believe that the cornerstone actually represents the foundational cornerstone, but it actually says head of the corner, so it's talking about the top angle. But he's also the foundation that the temple is built on. It's built on the rock, and Jesus is the rock, so he's the foundation as well as the capstone of the temple. Okay, so both the foundation and the headstone are connected with the number 76. You see the headstone in the Greek. You see that the foundation, the earth, is 776 in the Hebrew. And then the Strong's number for Adam in the Greek is 76. And the word Adam in the Hebrew actually spans from H120 through to 128. It actually goes a little bit beyond that, but the meaning begins to change a little bit after that. But as you can see, Strong's number 120 is the word Adam, which means man, and you see that man was created in Genesis 1:27, and so again, that matches up with the head of the corner, because you see that here in 1 Peter 2:7, which makes the number 127. And 127 is the ratio of the height versus the diameter of the earth and the moon put together for the height, and the diameter, or half the diameter of the earth, makes the ratio 127 or 1.27 infinitely, which rounds up or rounds out to 127. And then you have the Great Pyramid of Giza is the same proportion, so it has the same ratio, as well as New Jerusalem. Okay, so God created man in Genesis 1:27, and you see it again in Genesis 2:7, where the Lord God formed man, which is Adam, of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. So Adam is connected with the number 27 or 127, and the Strong's number for Adam actually spans from the number 120 through 127. It actually goes through to about 128. goes even a little bit beyond that, but the meaning starts to change a little bit. But you see that 127 means ground or land, and it also refers to the color red. You see that it says from its general redness. So it means man or the earth or the color red. And it goes through to Strong's 128. You can see that's the word Adama, which means the earth. And then once you get to 129, it still means the earth, but it starts to change the meaning a little bit. Okay, so it basically spans from 120 to about 128, which is interesting because if you look at the term last Adam in the Greek, it's Strong's number 2078. It's the word eschatos, which is where we get the word eschatology from. And as you can see, it means extreme, last in time or in place. And over here it says it refers to the latter end. Okay, so Jesus is the last Adam, and Adam is Strong's number 76, and last is Strong's number 2078. And as I mentioned before, the height of the Great Pyramid with the capstone is estimated at 5,776 inches. The ratio of the current height is 1.27 infinitely. And the volume, as I've mentioned before, is 91,227,778. And so within that, you have the number 2277, which makes the number 27 amplified. It's also the Hebrew year of the Exodus. And then you also have the number 778, which is the current Hebrew year. Okay, you also had the Bethlehem conjunction on August 27th in the year 2016, which was the Hebrew year 5776. And this took place right beneath the constellation Coma Berenices. And the word coma is the word desire. And it's the same word that's used in Haggai 2:7, where it says the desire of all nations will come. And so this is the constellation Coma Berenices. But it's also represented as Coma Berenices hair, which is basically just an angle, and which, as I've stated many times before, I believe it represents the capstone to the pyramid, because this is exactly where the Sphinx is pointing to on the zodiac, right between Virgo and Leo, which is where we had this conjunction in 2016 on August 27th. Okay, so getting back to Lily, what happened is, because there were so many interesting parallels with the numbers 77 or 76 through 78 in the Greek and the Hebrew, I thought I would just check the Hebrew for Strong's number 77. Okay, and when I did that, I saw that it means I will make white or miry. And of course, this fits in perfectly with what's being represented here in the I Pet Goat movie with this character, because her name is Lily and she's wearing all white. So the allusion to the color white is obvious. Okay, and so this goes through to the next Strong's number, which is H78. It also means their whiteness, literally their tin is white. And it comes from this Strong's number, which is Strong's number 76. And this means blisters or boils. It also refers to an eruption. And so this is referring to, well, it's referring to the Exodus here and what took place with Pharaoh. But it's also alluding to the boils that it talks about here in Leviticus 13. If you look at the word boil, you see that it's a different Strong's number, but it means the same thing. It means boiled, inflamed spot, inflammation, eruption. And so over here in Leviticus 13, it's interesting that it comes up in chapter 13, but it's talking about boils from leprosy. And starting from verse 17, because again, it's interesting how it comes up in verses 17 and 18 that seem to talk about the restoration, but starting with verse 17, it says, "And the priest shall see him, and behold, if the plague be turned into white, then the priest shall pronounce him clean that hath the plague, he is clean. The flesh also, in which even the skin thereof was a boil, is healed." And so the healing takes place here in verse 18, and he's pronounced clean. In verse 17, if the boil turns white. But then over here in verse 19, it says if it's somewhat reddish, then he's not clean, and goes on to talk about that. But if it turns white, that's when he's pronounced clean and he's healed, and that comes up in verses 17 and 18. Okay, so the imagery that's being presented here is basically the same imagery that we have in this table that I've shown that's on April, wheat field, and Pentecost. I'd also put in the words Ruth, king, and lion in this part of the table, but as you can see, the word Ruth comes up here at an angle, and it's coming up right by where it's talking about the upper pool and the highway of the fuller's field. And as I've talked about before, the word fuller means to wash clean or make white. You can see that it's only used one time in the New Testament, and that's in Mark 9:3, and this was just after the Transfiguration. It talks about that starting in verse 2. It says, "And after 6 days," and of course what's being represented in the I Pet Goat movie is after 6,000 years. That's when Eve realizes, or Lily realizes, that the apple no longer belongs to her, or doesn't belong to her, and so she drops the apple. And so that would be 6,000 years. Over here it says, "And after 6 days Jesus taketh with him Peter and James and John, and leadeth them up into a high mountain apart by themselves, and he was transfigured before them, and his raiment became shining, exceeding white as snow, so as no fuller on earth can whiten them." And so the word fuller means to make white. And so that's what you have in this table. This was coming up in Isaiah 7. And this is where you had a confederacy going against Israel, starting with verse 1, which makes number 17 backwards. And then it was in verse 3 where the Lord said unto Isaiah, "Go forth now to meet Ahaz," which means rapture, as I mentioned before, "thou and Shear-Shabab," which means a remnant shall return. And I'll go ahead and show you the word Ahaz as well, that means rapture. It's Strong's number 271, which means he has grasped, and it comes from Strong's number 270, which again you have the number 27, which means grasp, take hold, seize, take possession, to be caught, grasped, fastened, take hold of, seize. Okay, so it basically means rapture. And so the Lord is saying to Isaiah, "Go forth now to meet Ahaz, thou and Shear-Shabab," which means the remnant shall return, thy son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool in the highway of the fuller's field. Okay, so that would be at the end of Hezekiah's tunnel at the pool of Shalom. Okay, this was coming up in Isaiah 7:3, which could be interpreted as 3:7, just like Strong's number 2777, which means the toe cap of a shoe. Okay, so you basically have the same imagery being represented here as you do in Isaiah 7. It's also the same imagery as Zechariah 14:4, which is a parallel to Revelation 10, verses 7 and 8, which is a parallel to Daniel 12, verses 7, 8, and 9. And it's also the same imagery as Ezekiel 2. And so you have the same thing depicted further down in the movie. In the scene over here, it's all a representation of the rapture and the transformation. but I'll try to explain that and some of these other images in the next video. Thanks for watching, and God bless.